I understand that you didn't plan to be a filmmaker. So I want to know your original plan. What was it and what shifted your direction and put you on this road?
Yeah, I mean, life, you change, right? You grow and you think you want to do one thing one time and then you move on to something else. I remember when I was a teenager, I think I even wanted to be a lawyer at one point, another time an actress. But my degree was basically in investment banking. It is in finance and investments. And that's what I thought I wanted to do. And that's what I did do. So I was an investment banker. I was an institutional equity stockbroker for the first few years of my career. I enjoyed it. I loved it. The knowledge, the travel, the money. It was great. And then I ran a business for about 10 years. It was more aligned with my life as a mother at that point. And then I went on what I call a life-changing trip. It sounds a bit cheesy, but it really was. I went to Palestine for the first time as an adult. So I'd been many times as a child, and then for over 25 years, nothing. And then I go back as an adult. I was really overwhelmed with the reality on the ground there. Despite everything I already knew about that reality from the books, from the films, from the sound bites and the news and all of that, really there was no comparison to kind of witnessing it and experiencing it and seeing it and talking with people on the ground in actual fact. I ended up writing therapeutically about things I had seen and felt and began to imagine as I exercised empathy. And then fast forward a couple of years, I felt this really strong desire to express myself creatively and tell these human stories that I had come across. So I adapted those initial writings. So it was sort of writing and producing my first 3 short films. I chose film because absolutely love film. I'm a fan of course, many of the arts, but when it came to what I was particularly interested in, it was film, theater as well, but film felt like the right way to go. I've always been a storyteller, so that was, something that came naturally to me. I have a very vivid visual verbal imagination. And so I decided, yalla, jump into the deep end and produce some short films. Once I was kind of in the industry at that point, I had the bug. I love where I am right now and what I'm doing. The directing part came later with this film, The Present.
You must have had doubts along the way, especially at the start, but were people around you, your family and friends, were they supportive or were they like, what are you doing with your life?
Well, I did the smartest thing, which is I didn't tell anyone. So when you feel called to something or compelled to do something, then you are all that matters in that equation, in my opinion, at that point. I'm driven by, I think it's Charles Bukowski, who said, if something burns your soul with purpose and desire, it's your duty to be reduced to ashes by it. I agree with that. It's like, you got to do it, you got to do it, no matter what, in that sense. So actually, I didn't tell anyone. I just started doing it. Of course, I had to tell the people that I started to work with and approach and even hire. But people close to me, I didn't actually tell them. And then when I finally kind of revealed my first pieces of work, which were those 3 shorts, I think a lot of people were surprised, of course, blown away, but also pleasantly surprised. It wasn't a sort of, oh God, what has she done with her life? These are really bad. It was a positive reaction from everybody. And then since then, it's only gotten better. So I haven't had to contend with the naysayers or the kind of bad energy that might have arisen. And I recommend that, by the way. It doesn't mean you don't have to tell anyone. It just means that when you decide something and you really feel that there is something you must do, you should do, you want to do, then it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks. And if including them in that journey might add that negativity or pull you down or give off a bad energy, then you're even better off not including them.
What was a moment where you felt I'm on the right track?
For me, before I started making these films, I was feeling a lot of frustration. I was feeling even what I refer to as verging on depression. And once I started to channel that into something creative and into my work, into these films, that cloud, that frustration, that depression started to dissipate. So that's when I knew I was doing the right thing, if you like, or what was right for me, because my actions were causing me to be happier, in that sense. Somehow I had found a channel of taking that sadness and frustration and what was depression or leading to depression because of the frustrations of wanting to express myself creatively, wanting to do something that could help express the stories of these silenced people, not people without a voice, but people who have essentially been silenced. I started to feel more elevated by it. Now you could say where I am right now, where the present has achieved all that's achieved on so many levels, I can tell you I feel that 100 times more even. This sense of I'm on the right path, I'm doing something that is bigger than the self, but at the same time very satisfying for myself on a more selfish level, if you like, and more rewarding on a personal level. I remember in post-production seeing the present on the big screen and feeling like we've got something special here, and that's great. And then, of course, when I was at the premiere of the present at Clermont-Ferrand, where we won the audience award, that was a moment of complete euphoria and triumph that I have pursued, the right direction of what I'm supposed to be doing, especially even more so because it was the audience award. And so you realized and recognized how it had resonated as a piece of art, an important piece of art with people, with audiences.
Let's go and talk about the present. What would you say is the main message behind it? Because there's an obvious idea, but what is the specific tone that you were going for, the specific sentiment that you wanted to leave the viewer with? And what inspired you to do that?
Look, for me, I wanted to make a human story and a humanizing story, if you like. At the end of the day, you end up making films or any kind of art where your creativity takes you. It starts with the inspiration. And so the inspiration was that, I wanted to tell this human story to do with one aspect of what is a very cruel and absurd reality on the ground in Palestine that spoke to me creatively at the time, whereby I've experienced these Israeli checkpoints. I've witnessed Palestinians at these checkpoints. And I have a friend who lives in an area where he's surrounded by checkpoints, but there's a checkpoint around 100 meters from his home. And so that's where the seed of inspiration for the actual basic element of the story comes from. But from there, you develop the film and the script and the story evolves and so forth. And you ultimately want to give audiences an emotional experience. I believe that's what all good films should do. So as a filmmaker, whether I was making a film on this subject matter or not, I want to give audiences an emotional experience. Ultimately, that is the currency you deal in with film, emotion. Otherwise, you're not making such a great film, in my opinion. But when it comes to this specific story, I also wanted to go that step further, of course, and I wanted to leave audiences in contemplation. And I absolutely love it when I do get messages or emails or people say to me, I thought about your film so many times after, or for days after, or it's even come back to me a couple of weeks later. That makes me so happy because I wanted the film to leave people contemplating. I don't want to say haunting them, but in some ways, yes, where they have to think about what it is and the human dynamics that Yusuf and Yasmin, are the father and daughter in the film, have to deal with this absurd situation, the frustrations and the humiliations. And for people to ask themselves, would they accept such treatment and such a life for themselves? And ultimately then, why should anyone else accept such a reality? I'd also love people to want to understand that reality more because, yes, it is a fiction film, but it is based on a reality that exists today in the present. Thus, the duality of the name. The present is in a gift and the present time as now.
Do you remember a specific like reaction or feedback maybe from a public figure who came up to you and said, this really affected me? Do you have like a memory that stands out?
Lots of public figures have come out and said lovely things about the film. I mean, I can see Mohamed Hesham behind you on the right on your wall, and he sent me a DM because we know each other and on WhatsApp how much he loved the film. And Rashida, the congresswoman, she retweeted about it, and then we were actually on a panel together the other day regarding the Human Rights Watch report on Palestine, and she also then posted something, saying how much she loved the film. The ones that have stuck with me the most, to be honest, are when I've received messages from complete strangers who are Palestinians who live in Palestine, and they thank me and they said things like, I feel like I've been seen, or, this was me just yesterday, like this is my life. And that's when I kind of go, ooh, okay, that stays with me and impacts me, and again makes me happy to know that the film is more than just what one would say is entertainment in that sense.
Talking about what's happening right now in Palestine, how everything that's going on right now making you feel, and what do you hope everyone who has a platform can say?
My hope is what it's always been, which is that as a world community, as well as a Palestinian community internally and externally, we could unite and be vocal and stand together in active solidarity to demand, the Palestinians' rights, human rights, their freedom, their equality are upheld, adhered to, that an end to occupation and an end to an apartheid system that has evolved, whether you like it or not, it has, in actual fact, come to an end, right? And really what I really hope is courage to be bold in those demands, to stop cowering, in the face of whether it's pressures or censorship or perception or reputation. Right is right, wrong is wrong at the end of the day. So what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah and, in Jerusalem, essentially, when I'm seeing Palestinians standing together right now in frustration and in defiance, it actually makes me happy. Palestinians cannot be expected to sit docilely and quietly and just take every violation, every injustice over and over again, day after day, week after week, year after year, for decades. It's absurd. What I really, really hope is that the momentum builds and that we can no longer turn a blind eye, and that communities around the world, or let's say the world community, no longer turns a blind eye. The world's awareness of what's happening in reality on the ground grows, and it grows into something of substance, which I think it is already, actually. And I just hope that we get to a sort of tipping point where the momentum grows faster and faster and stronger. And this idea of self-censorship, or, like I said, lack of courage, depletes. And so the suffering ends.
And obviously what you said about courage and being fed up and having enough, like that's exactly what I got from the little girl who pushed the fridge. It's like a very who's just seen so much ugliness in the world, and she's just fed up and she doesn't care. And it's just something like that honestly breaks your heart, that a child has to go through that, but also that they have the courage because they don't overthink stuff. And that was beautiful, honestly, to see in the film. And that is what we're seeing right now on social media all over there that's happening right now. It's like life imitating art, imitating life, to be honest.
I love what you just said. Life imitating art, which is what the present was, or the art was imitating life, actually, which what the present was. And then life imitating art, which I hope, that garners, and then it continues, this idea of that for me, if the film has caused any inspiration or motivation, or that's a beautiful thing, because at the end of the day, I'm not interested in making art that doesn't have that depth and that meaning and that purposefulness built into it. There was the former CIA director, John Brennan, I don't know if you saw, but he wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times. Well, the New York Times published his opinion piece referring to The Present, the film. And then Christiana Amanpour was interviewing John Brennan on CNN and brought up the opinion piece, and they discussed the film again. And he, regardless of what one thinks of him and, and what he's done in the past, but what was interesting to me was that he was referring to Yasmin by name, and he was moved by the film. So he wasn't talking about a report. He wasn't talking about sort of some facts and figures or some resolution. He was talking about a film, which was art. And it was interesting to me that that's what resonated, that prompted him to write an opinion piece that spoke to sort of the humanity of Palestinians. And on the interview, he's talking about Palestinian rights and aspirations, and he referred to the youth of Palestine like Yasmin. Yeah. And so you realize that the lines between, yes, life mimicking art, mimicking life, and the power of art and the power of film as a means of advocacy and communication. I mean, it's the most powerful means of meaningful human communication I think the world has ever known. And for me, that was a perfect example of that connection. And when you have the full ingredient of maybe, yes, something that has caused emotional engagement over a subject, like a film, like a piece of art, whatever it is, and then you have certain incidents happening, and then you have the media covering it in a certain way, or whatever it is, and the conversation is being had, and then you have the youth, for example, feeling motivated and inspired, and all of these pieces come into play. Maybe incredible, beautiful things can happen. I mean, I play my part in all this, and you play your part in this, and everyone plays their part in it, and that's what tipping points are made of, ultimately.
What would you say is the power of short films?
Short films, of course, are just easier to make, right? And they're cheaper to make, and they take less time to make. And so there's the pragmatic side of it, which is helpful. It's useful. I also think that, of course, in this day and age, we've got a lot of, only a limited bandwidth. Not all the time, but just generally, there's much more expectations of sort of instant gratification and less time people are willing to give for a film, or less time that they're just willing to give in general. So I think they're a very special genre. I do. And I think that they're starting to be more appreciated. I mean, an example of that is the fact that The Present is on Netflix. And maybe a few years back, there weren't shorts on Netflix. In fact, I'm pretty sure there weren't. And now, there's kind of a respect and an appreciation that there is a demand for shorts, and that so there's a market for shorts, an audience for shorts, and that they in themselves are gems, emotional experiences and powerful storytelling. So I love the short film genre. That said, I also love the, feature length genre. I love the documentary. I love the fiction versus nonfiction. Each one has its importance and strength. And I think that short films were underestimated, and they are starting to be appreciated and respected more.
What was your first reaction when you heard that The Present got an Oscar nomination? Were you expecting that? Same with BAFTA when you won, the festival. I want to know your reactions.
No, I keep my expectations low. I think it's Shakespeare who said, expectation is the root of all heartache. And I so agree with that. So I always keep my expectations low. It doesn't mean I don't aim high. I just keep my expectations low. It's a self-defense mechanism, I think, self-protection. I mean, it's on social media. I think I had a sort of moment of euphoria, then a moment of not quite realizing, okay, how huge that is. And then a few minutes later, I ended up jumping up on the table at home. So, and actually no one's seen this video, but while I was on the table, I was actually going, an Oscar and a BAFTA, and an Oscar and a BAFTA, in the sense of we've been nominated for both. It was a moment of reality hitting. And winning the BAFTA, of course, that's fantastic. Don't even know. It's like I was over the moon. But ultimately, for me, it's always been about people watching the film. And so the film being able to be shared far and wide and bigger audiences to see your work. And so those nominations and the BAFTA win have certainly contributed and helped towards that. But I'm equally happy that the film is on Netflix, you know, in that sense. And it also helps me forge forward with my work, my next work, in that sense. So I'm only now, really, now that everything's kind of over, in that sense, being able to really enjoy what all of this means in the bigger scheme of things.
For you, as Farah, like, what is your dream or goal for the next 5 years or like couple of years? Something that you want to achieve when it comes to filmmaking?
I think the next major bridge to cross that I would love to do, and I'm hopefully going to do, is I've written already my first feature, and I'd like to direct my first feature. And of course, I would love it to resonate just as much as the present has, if not more, and reach far and wide like the present has, if not more, and receive that critical acclaim and appreciation and love.
What can you tell us about your upcoming feature film that you're working on, and any
Not
other?
much. It's a character-driven drama thriller about love, loss, and self-absolution. So I wrote it, I will be directing, and I will be one of the producers.
That's like a big deal. Like, it's a full-on like task. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.